Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of Copper Age Anatolia, the civilization that invented metallurgy 9,000 years ago. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. 9,000 years ago, in a village in what is now southeastern Turkey, someone picked up a lump of green stone and hammered it cold into a bead. It was the first metal object ever made by human hands. The site is called Çayönü. The bead is a copper pin, and it sits in an Ankara museum as the earliest known use of metal on Earth, a fact that almost no one outside specialist archaeology knows. The story of how humanity moved from stone to metal begins not in Egypt, not in Mesopotamia, but in Anatolia, modern Turkey, and spreads westward into Europe through the hands and genes of farming communities who carried their metallurgical knowledge with them. By 4560 BC, that tradition had produced the richest prehistoric gold treasure ever discovered, the Varna Necropolis in Bulgaria, where a single grave contains more gold than all other objects surviving from that entire era combined. A civilization of extraordinary sophistication, almost entirely forgotten. Why? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth, rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding Copper Age Anatolia, the civilization that invented metallurgy 9,000 years ago, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Çayönü, a Neolithic site in southeastern Turkey, has produced copper artifacts dated to approximately 7,200 BC. Hammered native copper formed into beads, pins, and small tools. This is the earliest confirmed use of copper by humans anywhere in the world. The copper was cold hammered rather than smelted. The metalworkers shaped naturally occurring copper nuggets without heat, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of the material's properties before smelting was invented. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Çayönü, the famous Neolithic proto-city in central Turkey, occupied from 7,500 to 5,700 BC, shows evidence of lead and copper smelting by approximately 6,400 BC, the earliest known instance of extracting metal from ore using heat. This advance from cold hammering to smelting represents a fundamental technological leap that would eventually underpin every Bronze Age civilization in the ancient world. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the Varna Necropolis in Bulgaria, discovered accidentally by a construction worker in 1972, contains the richest prehistoric gold treasure ever found. Dated between 4,560 and 4,450 BC. Its 294 graves yielded over 6 kilograms of gold objects, including scepters, masks, armlets, and jewelry of extraordinary technical refinement. It predates the gold of Mesopotamia and Egypt by over 1,000 years. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Grave 43 at Varna is among the most remarkable single burials in prehistoric Europe. The burial of an adult male contains more gold than all other surviving prehistoric objects from the entire period combined worldwide. Among the objects, a gold-sheathed penis sheath, a gold axe scepter, hundreds of gold beads, and a copper axe. The individual buried here held a social position of extraordinary power in a society we have no name for. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of ancient DNA analysis of populations associated with the Copper Age, Balkans, and Anatolia confirms genetic continuity between Anatolian farmers and the people buried at Varna. The spread of copper metallurgy westward from Anatolia into Europe matches the spread of Anatolian farmer ancestry into the same regions, as revealed by ancient genomics over the past decade. Technology and people move together. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the single origin hypothesis for metallurgy, that copper working arose once in Anatolia and spread outward, is now the mainstream view, supported by both the archaeological sequence and ancient DNA. Çayönü copper beads are the earliest node in a technological tradition that produced, within 3,000 years, the sophisticated goldsmithing of Varna and ultimately the Bronze Age economies of Greece, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Copper Age Anatolia, the civilization that invented metallurgy 9,000 years ago. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that metallurgy arose independently in Anatolia around 7,200 BC and diffused westward into Europe and eastward into the Fertile Crescent, carried by migrating farming populations. The single origin hypothesis, supported by the geographic and chronological sequence of copper working sites, and by ancient DNA showing Anatolian farmer ancestry spreading into Europe. The principal objection is that independent invention in multiple regions cannot be entirely excluded given sparse evidence from some areas. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that metallurgy arose independently in multiple locations in Eurasia, a multiple origin hypothesis with less support from current evidence than the single origin model. Some researchers point to early copper objects in the Fertile Crescent and the Caucasus as potentially independent developments. Ancient DNA and the chronological primacy of Anatolian sites make independent invention increasingly difficult to sustain, though the debate is not fully closed. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Varna gold represents a pre-Bronze Age elite society whose social complexity has been dramatically underestimated by mainstream archaeology. The concentration of wealth in Grave 43 implies inherited rank, specialized craft production, and long-distance trade networks in a society conventionally categorized as late Chalcolithic. The objection is that the evidence is confined to the cemetery and the broader social structure of the Varna culture remains poorly documented. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree, that is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Copper Age Anatolia, the civilization that invented metallurgy 9,000 years ago, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes chemical analysis of the Çayönü copper objects confirms they are native copper, naturally occurring metallic copper that required no smelting. The cold hammering technique is evident in the microstructure of the metal. Radiocarbon dating of associated organic material places the objects firmly at approximately 7,200 BC, making them the oldest confirmed metal artifacts on Earth and establishing Anatolia as the birthplace of human metallurgy. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented slag deposits at Sadalhöyük provide physical evidence of smelting, the glassy waste product of heating ore to extract metal. Dated to approximately 6,400 BC, this slag demonstrates that within 800 years of the first cold hammering at Çayönü, Anatolian communities had developed the far more technically demanding process of pyrometallurgy, extracting copper from malachite ore using high-temperature furnaces. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the Varna Necropolis gold has been radiocarbon dated to 4,564,450 BC using organic materials found with the burials. The gold objects show sophisticated alloying and forming techniques. Ancient DNA from Varna individuals published in recent years confirms their genetic affinity with Anatolian farmers, establishing the biological and cultural link between the earliest Anatolian metallurgists and the later Varna gold workers of the Bulgarian coast. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Copper Age Anatolia, the civilization that invented metallurgy 9,000 years ago. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Çayönü copper beads are displayed at the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara. The Varna gold is housed at the Varna Regional History Museum in Bulgaria. Both sites receive a fraction of the attention given to Egyptian or Greek antiquities, despite their greater age and significance. Ongoing excavations at Çayönü and Sadalhöyük continue to refine the chronology of early metallurgy. The ancient DNA revolution of the past decade has transformed the field. We can now trace the movement of Anatolian farmers and their copper-working tradition across Europe with genetic precision. The Varna Necropolis in particular deserves far wider recognition, the richest prehistoric gold find on Earth, sitting in a Bulgarian regional museum, largely unknown outside specialist circles. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Copper Age Anatolia, the civilization that invented metallurgy 9,000 years ago, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Copper Age ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.